thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
On the 24th to the 26th of January 2024, Bet UK is back, and even better for educators. New for 2024, Table Talks empowers educators to collaborate openly and connect deeply with like-minded individuals in the education space, as well as tech user labs, the brilliant new tutorials and working groups at Bet, where technology users will learn how to get more out of their institution's tech from the top education technology experts in the world. Whatever your goal, you'll find it at Bet 2024. Educators go free. Get your tickets today at www.uk.betShow.com/visitor-registration.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show. My name is Kathryn Taylor. Tonight my very special guest is Jane Green, MBE. I'll be chatting to Jane about her personal story of the challenges of navigating the education system in the context of neurodivergence and the challenges and opportunities that she's experienced.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show, everyone. I'm Kathryn and I'm speaking to you live from Buckinghamshire in the UK. I'm waiting just to speak to Jane Green this evening, which is going to be a fantastic treat. She's just had her investiture as an MBE for her services to neurodivergent people and those with related hypermobility conditions, including Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So apologies for my bad pronunciation there. I'm sure that Jane will be able to educate us all about what that entails tonight. We'll be discussing her experiences as a neurodivergent person in education, and we will be having a chat about the opportunities and challenges that she has associated with this. Now, remember, if you are listening in live and would like to join us either to post a question in the chat for Jane to answer, or if you want to call in and speak to us, then please do download the Podbean app and visit ttradio.org and click on the Listen Live on the homepage. This should take you directly to the show. There you can post comments and ask questions during our conversation. And once I've spoken to Jane, I'll open up to any of you who'd like to call in. You can call in by pressing the icon at the top of the screen on your phone's app and click this, and I'll be able to connect you through. So I'm hoping that Jane's going to be joining us very, very shortly. But while we just wait for Jane to come through, I'm really interested in reading about her work, which I've just been reading a bit about today. And I think it's very common, perhaps, for teachers these days to be quite familiar with issues surrounding neurodivergent people, because that's something that we all as teachers do have to receive training on, quite rightly, and to make suitable adaptations in our practice. So that's something that's very commonly known. But I think what I've learned from looking into Jane's work is the fact that actually there's a correlation between the neurodivergent conditions such as ADHD and ASD and things like that, but also the hypermobility. And what I found particularly fascinating is the idea that there's a lot of challenges for young people and children who are experiencing pain because of their hypermobility, and this actually compounds some of the challenges that they face. And so I found that really, really interesting. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take us over to the news and our messages, and then we'll get Jane on and we'll be able to hear more about her perspective and her experiences with that. Do stay tuned.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
On the 24th to the 26th of January 2024, Bet UK is back, and even better for educators. New for 2024, Table Talks empowers educators to collaborate openly and connect deeply with like-minded individuals in the education space, as well as tech user labs, the brilliant new tutorials and working groups at Bet, where technology users will learn how to get more out of their institution's tech from the top education technology experts in the world. Whatever your goal, you'll find it at Bet 2024. Educators go free. Get your tickets today at www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
School summer holidays are often a hot topic, but they made the news again in The Guardian as leaders in Wales appear to be considering changes. According to reports, Wales's Minority Labour Administration wants to shrink summer breaks from 6 weeks to 5 and eventually reduce it to 4 weeks. The plan would see the time added to half-term breaks in October and May. The proposal would equalise the length of terms and break the connection with Easter by fixing the timing of the spring break regardless of when the religious festival falls. The newspaper says the plans follow research by the government which suggests that parents struggle to organise and pay for childcare over the summer. Plaid Cymru, which supports the proposal, said in a statement that the current calendar was outdated as it was designed a long time ago, and that some families find the summer break very long and impacting negatively on their well-being. However, the article also points out that evidence of the harm to learning from school holidays is unclear, as much of the evidence comes from the United States, where summer holidays can be up to 12 weeks long rather than the 6 to 7 weeks in the UK. John Hattie, Professor of Education at the University of Melbourne, said the effects from school holidays are very small, and there is little reason to believe that the length of the school year has much effect at all. A study from 2019 that looked at pupils from primary schools in an area of high deprivation in Scotland and England found no effect on reading skills. In Northern Ireland, schools typically have 8 weeks off in the summer, but generally have results in exams that are better than those in England or Wales. However, a 2022 study did find evidence of worsening mental health in some age groups over long summer breaks. Surveys done in Wales found 60% of parents said they were quite happy with the school year as it is. In 2013, then Education Secretary Michael Gove gave schools in England the power to choose the timing of holidays, but most schools kept the 6 weeks. The BBC News website reports on the Beyond Ofsted inquiry. The inquiry is chaired by former Schools Minister Lord Knight and is funded by the National Education Union. The report from the inquiry recommends that schools should instead be responsible for their own improvement plans. Ofsted has responded by repeating its previous statement that inspections are needed to ensure a high-quality education. The inquiry said that Ofsted was now seen by many as toxic and not fit for purpose, and in need of major reform. The removal of single-word judgments was also recommended, and this echoed another report on school improvement released earlier by the Institute for Public Policy Research, which also called for narrative-style judgments rather than single words. The Beyond Ofsted inquiry recommended stopping Ofsted from having direct contact with schools, and instead schools should draw up their own improvement plans, which would make them accountable to parents and the wider local community. Lord Knight, speaking to the BBC, said Ofsted created a culture of fear in our schools. His report also said that Ofsted had become under-resourced for the high-stakes job expected of it. A spokesperson for Ofsted said 9 out of 10 schools say inspections help them to improve. In related news, the current Chief Inspector of Schools, Amanda Spielman, has written in her final annual report about parents being increasingly willing to challenge school rules in England. She described the unwritten contract between home and school as fractured and that it will take time to repair. The report is broadly positive, but draws attention to a shift in behaviour, attendance and attitudes to education since the pandemic, describing it as leaving a troublesome legacy. Full details of her comments can be found across media outlets. Teach First has celebrated its 20th anniversary, with 3 former Prime Ministers praising the charity's work in tackling education inequalities. According to Teach First's own website newsfeed, the charity has recruited more than 16,000 teachers to work in disadvantaged areas across England. Teach First CEO Russell Hoby reaffirmed the charity's mission to help Britain's most disadvantaged children to achieve their full potential. Finally, student immigration data has been released, with Home Secretary James Cleverly stating the biggest drivers of immigration to the UK are students and healthcare workers. He further commented that this was testament to our world-leading university sector. According to data, Indian nationals account for over 1/4 of all sponsored study grants, followed by Chinese nationals. The education sector relies heavily on students applying to UK universities for significant funding, but there is also political pressure to reduce net immigration. Any plans to make changes to the current system will be monitored carefully, although for now the focus remains on illegal migration rather than legal routes. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
But it's so fantastic to have you on, Jane. How are you? Apart from
I'm fine.
stressed.
I'm fine. No. Do you know, after all these years of doing presentations, I'm so used to tech going wrong. It would be strange if it didn't. So yeah,
Okay,
it's
well,
all fine.
I'm absolutely delighted to have you with us on Teachers Talk Radio this evening, Jane. I wonder if you could just set the scene for listeners, actually, and let us know a bit about your context and how you have become involved in the work that you do. I know you yourself, you are autistic. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, I'm neurodivergent. I'm autistic. I have ADHD, very late diagnoses,
Hmm.
and probably quite a lot more. But at my age, I'm 61. I think I have adapted over the years, and I've got lots of sort of strategies that I've used. And so I sort of knew I was, um, but being quite literal, I also wanted to have the diagnosis
Mm.
officially for myself because I think that's important. But everybody's different, and I'm probably have a few more differences as well. I know I'm dyscalculic, which is a
Mm.
numbers issue. Someone thinks I'm dyspraxic and dyscalculic, so we'll see. But I'm not trying to get a list, but I think it's quite common. And I think all these co-occur. And that's what is so interesting. Plus some health challenges, which hopefully I'm going to talk about now. Um,
Yes, yeah, please do. And I just wanted to say, I was reading your paper, the article that came out just earlier this year, which is absolutely fascinating because I've got nieces and nephews who are neurodivergent, and certainly other family members. We've had another family member who is my age. Well, she's not quite as old as me, but she's in her adulthood, in her 40s. She has ADHD. She was a gymnast as a child, and
uh,
I read your paper and I thought that makes
yeah.
so much sense. You
It
know.
does, doesn't it? It's like a light bulb clicking on, and it's like, how did we not know this or connect the dots before?
Mm.
We still have a lot of barriers. I think the paper came out earlier this year. It's a topical review in a published journal, and it's the first. I've always been really, really passionate about this. So you asked me how it came about.
Mm.
I left school at 16
Yeah.
with just two qualifications. So considered them, that's my story, and a hypochondriac because I didn't know that the pain I had wasn't normal. I mean, how do you know if you're always growing up with it? And everyone says, oh, that's meant to be painful, or oh, everyone gets headaches now and then. And you think, okay, this blinding headache that I can't talk or move is normal, and I'm just making a big fuss about it, or the bloating and so on.
Mm.
And so that carried on for a long time. And I won't go into all my story unless you want it right now, but I became an educationalist because I had children and we kept being excluded, even as in nursery school, which was, the refrigerator mother syndrome thingy. And so it just sort of exacerbated the whole, you're not good enough and you don't have skills and you can't be a good mother and you've caused this to your children and now your children have got it and so on. But
Mm.
I knew I was different, and therefore I wanted to be an educational psychologist, and I had to have a degree. But I literally could not write um, my name really, and it was really hard. But I studied psychology, and I realized I certainly was different, and but there wasn't a name for it. Women were not allowed to be autistic at that
Mm.
point. I didn't know about the ADHD, and I won awards, and I became a teacher and did more degrees, and then became the lead and advisory teacher for the local authority. Worked in all areas and phases of education, and for the National Autistic Society and other ones. But I think what came to me with every single school I went to, I saw a pattern of similar things with these children and students. They were floppy. They had to move a lot. They needed to move around, but they also had difficulty writing. Handwriting, and we would always separate. The autistic children had to have schedules. ADHD children had to have the thorobands to move and bounce against and
Mm.
strict rules, and the dyspraxic children had the supports. And I just thought, hang on, why have they got so many allergies? Because I saw that from my children, extreme anaphylactic food,
Mm.
direct food allergies of mine. But also the eczema, the eye issues, the teeth issues, the skin issues, the rashes, the lactose intolerance, um, and then bearing in mind my issues. But there was no name for it then. There was absolutely no name. And so I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it was something. That's all I can explain. And of course, I had no support myself as a teacher. And so I kept sort of losing my job um, because of this. Being neurodivergent, I didn't have support because I wasn't allowed to be neurodivergent, and also being ill because I remember dragging my leg across car parks. I mean, it was so swollen. I wanted my leg cut off. I just couldn't get into my car at the end of the day. I was literally dragging it. So that's why I was so passionate to do this when I did lose my career. Um, I became very ill. I mean, I was extremely ill for 2 years. I couldn't even open my eyelids at times, but I did stabilize, and I thought something has to be done. For the I've done enough training over the years for neuro, autistic, ADHD, and so on, but this hasn't been joined up at all. And luckily, I sort of um, connected with a researcher who was working in this area for quite a few years, and is now a patron of a charity I run. And
because he's at John Moores University. Is this David Moore you're talking about?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I was looking at.
He is one of the pain advisors on the paper. The other one is Dr. Eccles who's actually done the data research, connecting the dots between hypermobility and neurodivergence. And so linking all these up, and the researchers, which is really key, we sort of have developed this going on and pioneering this, because I think what's really, really exciting is it's always been separate, like the body and brain have been separate, like they're two completely different things, but in my experience they're usually joined up, and why not join them up? But I think what's really unusual is the fact that our connective tissues in our body are likely to be very different than the general population. That's what the Dr. Eccles research says. And
is that in like physiological differences then?
Yes, it's quite complex. So I am not medical, but it is likely our connective tissue is different. So that's found throughout our body. It surrounds our organs. It surrounds like the autonomic nervous system, our lymphatic vessel system, blood cells, particularly around stomach, which is interesting. And I think it's quite weak. It's quite lax. You've heard of collagen, I know.
Yes.
And so that's quite weak, and that means we're quite bendy. You can see the we used to do double jointed tricks as children. A lot of us. Hence your gymnast niece, is it? I think.
Well, that's my sister-in-law. Believe me, we've got it in our family coming at us from all angles. So it's my niece. She's very bendy and very sensory and autistic, and my sister-in-law on the other side of the family is the gymnast, and that's going back to sort of the 80s and 90s, that she was a child and of course experienced as is described in the paper, this idea of the shame that goes with it, and the stress that arises from people, as you described, sort of saying, "Oh, that's normal. You shouldn't complain about it. Everyone feels a bit of pain. Come on, toughen up." All of that stuff. When actually, it really is not. It's not a similar experience. And I think the way that you've kind of come at it in your work is to really make people understand that there is a connection and there is a qualitative difference in the experiences. And it kind of, once you start to allow people to find ways of expressing their physical as well as their sort of neurodivergent selves, we're just that step closer to actually enabling them to flourish, aren't we?
Oh yes, I think knowledge and understanding, these things seem to come out of the blue. And it's a really, really scary situation, even as an adult. So as a child, you can be, and some people are much more severe than I was. All these different things are sort of seem to be attacking you. That's what it
Mm,
feels like. Your
yeah.
body is in threat mode, it's in fighting mode, and everything's going wrong. Your stomach, all the organs, you can also the body can react due to blood pressure issues and something called dysautonomia, which is basically the I'm going to put this really simply. The blood doesn't get up to the brain very well sometimes
Okay.
because of the weak collagen. Let's
Oh,
put it like
sorry,
that.
Jane, you're just breaking up there a little. I
Oh,
wonder if is your phone flat on the table? Is that
I'll just put it flat in case.
perfect? Just because when you touch it, that's the microphone's just picking that up. So that would be really great if it's just flat on the table, please.
I'm not touching it, but I put it flat. But
Perfect.
I
Thank
have
you.
got tech things going on today, I think. And so and often when we move position, so from standing to sitting or sitting, sorry, lying to sitting and sitting to standing, the blood doesn't pump up to our brain, and it can make us really foggy and dizzy,
Mm,
like
mm,
almost some people do faint, but some people just get really, really dizzy and can't, like brain fog
mm,
completely. And the heart has to then really, really work harder to pump that blood up. And so it pounds, it feels like it's absolutely pounding out of your chest.
mm,
And it makes you feel anxious. You start being sweaty, you start shallow breathing, and to everybody else outside, you look anxious. But
mm,
actually, before this happened, you were perfectly fine. You weren't anxious at all. And this is where, if you, I'm not sure if this is the right word, misnomer, the errors come in, perhaps thinking it's all mental anxiety or
yeah.
emotional anxiety when it actually has a physical origin. And so I'm not saying other anxiety with neurodivergence doesn't occur. Of course it does, but we have to take into effect the physical because this is real. And if we don't believe children and young people have and adults, by the way, have these issues, we tend to mask the pain. We avoid it. We just say, oh, well, it's not real. I'm
Mm,
obviously making it up. And you have that sort of cyclic hypochondriac thing going on for decades, and I see it in so many people. As they get older, they've sort of lost confidence and given up because they feel they'll never be believed. It's just
mm,
one of
mm.
those, another weird thing that everybody thinks I'm weird, and
And
and it's
it's
awful. Mm,
yeah, it's so interesting because I mean, this is completely different medical thing, and I'm not a medic either. But I was reading a research book, and it was all about liver specialists, and they were talking about how sometimes the what you'd see in a medical textbook, this patient should be like in a coma or whatever with the combination of symptoms they've got. But what they were saying is they were so surprised that people with really severe diagnoses on the page actually who should have been in hospital was still up and walking around. And I think it's that's resonated with what you've just said, because I think there are when you are sort of, especially as a child, when you're sort of not perhaps able to advocate for yourself,
mm,
I can see how people would really push on through some quite extraordinary pain that would have most of us on our backs.
mm,
And
exactly.
the fatigue of living with that for a prolonged period of time, it must be absolutely exhausting.
Absolutely exhausting. And I think when you're trying to work so hard and push through and achieve in education or employment or have a family,
Mm,
it that it's exacerbated 100 times, and you become sort of stuck, and then your body becomes really inflamed, and as I
yeah.
said, it seems like everything is attacking you. I
Mm,
mean, I became anaphylactic to things, not direct food, but all sorts of things in my environment, but also food. I think just because my body was so fragile at that time, and thinking everything was coming to an end, so I couldn't eat. And this was as an adult. I was literally throwing up, reflux, absolute pain spasms, and even when I could, I became absolutely scared of food. I became phobic of food because
Yeah,
I knew
yeah.
it would hurt. And yet all the tests come back negative. And this is what seems to happen with so many of our members. And so we that just again, like, oh, they've got a eating disorder. Again, this does happen with neurodivergent people, but also we have physical health issues. And I think what we're trying to say here is we have to think of the whole picture. We are brain and body joined up, and it's not just one thing. It's a whole thing, because if we don't consider physical health issues, it exacerbates the mental health well-being. I know, I've been there. I've seen it with so many others. And what we have to do as a whole community in all different groups is join up, because this is too important. And actually, it's also, in a weird way, really exciting, because this is pioneering this in the world. And this hasn't been done before. So the physical health, neurodivergent people all around the world and suffering physical health, particularly hormones come into play here. So we know that from the age of about 13 to 50, particularly girls, women, or those with female hormones are suffering more, because of the hormones having an effect on the connective tissue, probably.
I mean, do you think it's do they think it's is the autoimmune a reaction to this physical stress, do you think? And I know we're both, neither of us doctors, so I'm just I wonder what do they have any kind of idea about whether it's the physical stress that causes the exacerbation of the autoimmune type inflammatory responses, or is there a push and pull in both directions, do you think?
So I'm saying symptomatic hypermobility because most people don't get a diagnosis. The official diagnosis for adults are Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, and the most common is hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility spectrum disorders. For children, very, very often not diagnosed unless the rare types, which can be genetically tested. So they're not autoimmune. And so they're not autoimmune, they're connective tissue disorders. And they're throughout the body. But interestingly, I can say from our members I have in the charity, there's a lot of crossovers with autoimmune conditions like, endometriosis, lupus, thyroid. I'm going to miss them out. Some people might be cross with me. Sjogren's, rheumatoid arthritis. I'm probably going to miss some out.
I'm sure we. No, it's a really. I just find this so fascinating because, like, I feel, now that I'm aware of it, I'm seeing it everywhere. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. That's what you're going to do from now on.
And I just wonder, actually, because obviously our audience is a lot of teachers and educators out there, and one of the things that came out really strongly is that not only is there a cultural and a misunderstanding of the very real health issues that maybe have a comorbidity with the neurodivergence, we've also got the lack of voice of the young people themselves, who either don't have the vocabulary yet or are very not very verbal as anyway, and how they can't articulate verbally the pain that they're suffering, but also may actually experience the pain in an emotional way. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about how it can be communicated, and what we as educators could do to support that communication.
Yes, that's a really good question. I think what I always say is children don't, or people don't know what they don't know. So if
Mm.
you ask children about pain, or even adults, neurodivergent people, you have something called alexithymia. You have something like emotional cognition of knowing what's happening. We have different sensory issues like interoception issues. So we don't always
Mm.
know if we're hungry or tired or breathing a lot or need to go to the toilet. And the same for pain. We don't know if we're in pain or not. And so that's another little part to this picture of the whole body being different. Uh, and also, we're told it's social and emotional mental issues.
Mm.
Now, it is, but it's also physical. And I think what how to explain that? Well, obviously, being allowed to believing the child is key, believing the adult is key. So often in my experience, when I was training, we would be told, oh, they're very sensory sensitive, they'll say something hurt and we hardly touch them. Well,
Mm.
actually, some children do bruise really, really quick. Some adults do bruise really quickly. We have different types of skin. Some bruise extremely quickly. We have wound fragility, skin fragility, but it doesn't mean we all bruise, but some do. Some have very thick, silky skin, and so often teachers obviously are worried about safeguarding, and they have the absolute right to do that. But and so do parents, but the parents don't know either because it
Mm.
might be their normal. They bruise all the time. They're always in pain. That's normal because that's
Mm.
what they've grown up with. I know when
And
I
if they're dyspraxic as well, they're probably bumping into things. So
Yes, well, I think some of the research is sort of going towards the way that hypermobility is sort of part of dyspraxia or some of the mediator sort of
mm,
between that. And also, of course, most of us got diagnoses of fibromyalgia and
mm,
ME or chronic fatigue syndrome before we got the hypermobility. I think the other thing you can do is, as I said, is being aware that children can say this might hurt. Sometimes I can get a paper cut, and I think it's the most painful thing in the world.
mm.
And other times I might fracture my knee, for example, one of the times. Um, and I just carried on, and I was severely told off because it's one of the most severe injuries you can have, apparently. But it's just because so many times I haven't been believed, and maybe my sense of what hurts is different. I do realize that I have to check myself and see, yes, I'm not breathing very well. I think I've got an issue and my skin has all blown up. So
Mm.
I have to check that. But I think we have to get the right, we have to listen to their voices. And particularly in secondary age, it's really, really key because this is when most of the issues come to the fore. Eating issues, if they're going to throw up afterwards, it might not be because they want to or it's an eating disorder. It might be because it's reflux.
Mm.
It does
Mm.
happen. uh, so they're definite. I did a school toolkit for two other charities once, and with some tips in there, what to do on various things. PE is really key for us
Yeah.
because we can excel. We can really excel. We love moving and things, but and gym and all this. And if we excel at something, we tend to do it. We really excel 100%, and that's great. But I think as teacher, they need to know, about pacing, how to help the student know about pacing, how much they should do, if they need orthotics, if they need insoles. And also bear in mind that the student might need a wheelchair at times. They might not be able to walk or go upstairs, but other times you've seen them running down the corridor. They're not making it up. you
Yeah.
know this happens. They might need extra fluids. They might need to rest in between lessons. Yes, I know that's really difficult. um, but this is why often they're absent, because they get too tired, and
Yeah.
inflamed, absolutely exhausted.
That's interesting, and I've just seen that Paul has mentioned in the comments. Am I right in saying neurodivergent children are those with autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, etc., under an umbrella term, or is it more specific and physical? Paul, you don't sound ignorant at all. We're here doing this chat because I think it's an important issue and we want to broaden awareness of it. So that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
Jane, I wonder if you just want to clarify, because I know in our discussions, I hope you don't mind my saying that you told me off because I was getting it wrong and putting the wrong word and
That's
using
okay.
it. And I'm happy to be corrected. But could you just clarify exactly what's the umbrella term and what kinds of things are under that umbrella?
I can't actually. So neurodivergent means different from the majority.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority would be neurotypical,
Mm-hmm.
and neurodivergent is quite wide. When I say neurodivergent, I'm identifying those who are autistic, have ADHD, dyspraxic, and Tourette's, because the as I said, that latest research from our patron identifies those four things. But there's also some other data that, to a lesser extent, mentions dyscalculia, dyslexia. But there needs to be much more research on that, I think. But yet, no, neurodivergent is quite wide. It includes a lot more. So
Yeah.
I'm not excluding them, but I'm just identifying those in particular. And so the whole of humanity is neurodiverse. We're all neurodiverse. But I think that's been quite yeah, it's sort of got into the press for some reason, but no, we're neurodivergent.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you, and I hope that's answered your question. And of course, an individual might not have all of those things. They might have, elements or traits. I don't know. And this is another area where the language is tricky, because my son has been is quite just short of a diagnosis in some of those things, but we've been advised that it's just enough of a convergence to make his life a bit tricky, but just shy of diagnosis. And I don't know, I mean, I guess this is, as a whole area, is an area that does, I think we can expect to see more clarification as the research comes out, can't we?
Well, yes and no. So I'm going to be difficult here.
No, it's fine.
It's very rare for children to get diagnoses, because I think there are two things here. They don't want to label children too early.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes male hormones do protect more. And if you have a label, something like this, it might, I don't know, it might affect your later career in certain professions, or traveling abroad and so on. And it might not be as severe, because as you grow, people change. I don't know, I'm not a pediatrician.
Of course,
So,
yeah.
but they rarely, so we say symptomatic hypermobility, because a lot of people can be hypermobile. I know 6'2" men who can touch the floor with straight legs, and they don't have symptoms, so that's great. But the symptomatic means everything hurts. Even we have a lot of issues with gums, eyes, teeth,
Yeah.
tinnitus, all sorts. Some people are very, very severe. They have tube feeding, they have neck issues, something which I can't even pronounce at the moment at this time of night, called CCI and EAI, and that can affect the body in all sorts of difficult ways, but it's very hard to see because a lot of people aren't trained in it. And this comes back to school, actually, because teachers don't know about it, the Syncos don't know about it. If a student is often missing at school and says they're chronically ill, or the parent says they're too ill, you go to the doctor, can you verify this child is sick? The doctor won't know, because they're not trained in it, and they will say no. They might, as I said in the paper, they might be diagnostically overshadowing because they see autistic or ADHD, and they say, well, it obviously it's stress related, it's anxiety. And so they'll either get something called emotional based school avoidance, EBSA, or unauthorized absence. And this is why I think it's been so key, and particularly since COVID, because there's certain similarities there.
Yeah.
With some of the symptoms, definitely, a lot of the symptoms are similar.
And it's interesting. I think COVID in many ways has been a bit of a watershed for sort of flushing out some of these issues into the light, really, because certainly I know children who have, my sense, and this is again a layperson's view of it, my sense is that for a very long time there was a cultural feeling that there wasn't a choice and you just had to get on with it and you had to hold it together. And then COVID hit, and a very large proportion of the population found it very, very difficult, horrible. Obviously awful things happened, but I do think there's a section of children, young people, and probably adults as well, who just thought the break from the merry-go-round was a blessed relief. And then when everyone started to say, and now we go back to normal, how wonderful, they just have gone, well, no, thank you. It wasn't wonderful. And that opportunity to kind of not wear the thick skin, if you'll pardon the expression, has kind of brought these things all out into the fore, because the option to not have to endure the systematic masking, if you like, has shown itself. I don't know. What do you think about that perspective?
I think during COVID, I have to say personally, for me, it took away the pressure of going to meetings and doing stuff. I was, I think maybe that's more of the autistic side, being happy, almost not happy with COVID, obviously, but being insular. But the ADHD side wanted to get out at the same time, so it's a bit of this and that, Jekyll and Hyde, I suppose, isn't it? I don't know. For children, that might be the same thing, but I think physically it's different because there were different issues. A lot of children love going to school, love learning, love the structure. So I'm not saying it's all one way or the other, and I tend not to do that, actually. I tend to see the balance in both sides. But I think what I'm looking at is actually getting COVID had similar symptoms to what we call dysautonomia, so the fatigue and the palpitations and the dizziness and those sort of things, and the stomach issues seem to be quite similar. I don't know why. As I said, I'm not a scientist, but they do have very similar symptoms, and they're long-standing, and there's no definite answer, which seems to be, those are the very familiar things that we've found over the years. And historically, girls and women always thought of very fragile. If you look at historical pictures and films, the women always fainting and always pale. I always think, they probably got what we call postural tachycardia or something like that. Unless they're wearing very tight corsets and can't breathe. I don't know.
It's really interesting. Listen, Jane, we've got about 10 minutes left, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play our messages very quickly, and then we'll come back, and I'm going to invite anyone in the studio who'd like to just maybe either type a question into the chat or ring in, just to do so if they want to. Is that all right with you?
Of course.
Perfect. All right, I'll speak to you in just a moment then.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
On the 24th to the 26th of January 2024, Bet UK is back, and even better for educators. New for 2024, Table Talks empowers educators to collaborate openly and connect deeply with like-minded individuals in the education space, as well as tech user labs, the brilliant new tutorials and working groups at Bet, where technology users will learn how to get more out of their institution's tech from the top education technology experts in the world. Whatever your goal, you'll find it at Bet 2024. Educators go free. Get your tickets today at www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
Welcome back. I'm just going to bring Jane back in, and I can see Paul in the chat. You've put a really good question there. You've got a real mixed bag of children. You're primary, if I remember correctly, aren't you, Paul? One problem that comes up is that the child doesn't want to be seen as different, but needs the support and the systems in place. What's the best way to present these processes to the children with these conditions in a way that perhaps doesn't make them feel additionally uncomfortable because of the feeling different? Jane, I wonder what would you advise Paul on that?
It's always a very difficult question. Primary. So we often say children might need support on the carpet, might need cushions because they get very tired, but they might not want to. They might want to sit with their peers. And I think you have to get the pupil voice, what they want, and saying, well, you can do this, but maybe you can have, a structured time out after that to recuperate, if not recuperate, but in a way they can understand. Or they want to do they might have to wear supports. I don't know what children they are, or orthotics. It's easier with primary children in a way. They can have all the information that they can understand in a pictorial form. But again, you can't make children wear things or do things. And I've had teenagers who needed things, and, it's their choice. It might not be the wisest choice, but you have to let them find out. I think for primary children, if it's a serious issue, it depends. I don't really know the context, obviously, how serious it is. If it's a medical issue, of course, they need the medications. But if it's a question of they need support in the classroom sitting up or using a writing implement or something like that, maybe you could, I can't think of the words tonight, but exemplar something at the front that you need something at times.
So are you saying that the teacher should actually, if the child needs a cushion, the teacher should maybe model, say, oh, isn't that more comfortable now I've got a cushion?
Yeah, that often works. I would always use something like that at times, just so someone doesn't feel so different, or someone more, a child more outgoing will often take that as well and say, I'll do that too. And you can always find one in the classroom that will do that. So, but I don't really know the context. It depends what they've got and how much they understand what they can do. Some need a lot of movement, of course, and it might be completely different.
And a strategy that I've had, we've talked about in my school recently, is perhaps finding a way to give the movement in a non-obvious way. So perhaps you kind of think, well, there's going to be an opportunity to hand something out at some point, or to wash something up if it's art or whatever it is, and perhaps that child can, it doesn't draw, it's a job that would need doing anyway, and they just get to do it, and it kind of does cover off their movement
Absolutely,
needs. Yeah.
absolutely, all the time. I would always do that. Can you take the register? And that's a problem with digital ones, but we used to take the register and
Yeah.
do much more movement jobs. Can I just say, let's go back.
Yeah, no,
But
there's emails now, and there's no one to take a note down the
I
corridor.
know, I know. So you'll have to make jobs up, but that's why movement is so key. And but then you will get the other people saying, well, why do they always get the job to go out and do that? So you might have to do it in twos or something like that. But I'm sure you can make jobs up. You're a teacher and creative. But I do think it's important because um, keeping still and trying to keep our muscles straight is very taxing. We don't always know where they are. It's something called proprioception, and so moving them really helps to keep them realizing they join to us, and keeping the muscles sort of moving stops the pain. We don't know, they don't know they're in pain, so you might just see different sort of behavior coming out, but actually there's a reason for it. And they won't know either. So there are all sorts of different things you can do. So if you're sitting on stools in a science lesson, a lot of children need their legs up for the blood pressure, but that might look very odd to a teacher having that done.
Yeah.
So it's knowing what is there for the child. I have produced quite a few resources for teachers.
But I think as well, as you were saying earlier, for many GPs and people who are, this is a lot of the association with the physical nature of all of these issues is actually not widely known. And I was thinking and reflecting on this because many of our listeners will have heard of quality first teaching and how everyone's a teacher of send, and we might do a handout which has got a particular font that might actually be vital for one. I mean, it's helpful for everyone, but it's going to massively make the difference to the child that needs it. And I think the profession, certainly in my experience, is kind of getting their heads around that now in a much more broad sense than perhaps has been done in the past. But to then maybe think, well, maybe there should be something called quality first send, like quality first for physical as well. What could benefit everyone in a very general way might actually be vital for some, or should we really be much more? I don't know.
I strongly suggest we join the dots between neurodivergence and physical health, just with mental and social and emotional. So if we're looking at strategies and adaptations and approaches to neurodivergent people, which we are in education, luckily, we include the physical, and that's where I see it going very strongly. It will take time, obviously. I just say I presented to a large college, about 300 of my peers earlier this year. And something that struck me was an advisory teacher used to do one of my roles. And she said to me, I've taught hundreds and hundreds of neurodivergent children, particularly autistic, and only 3 ever had an EDS diagnosis. And I thought, well, yeah, that's probably right. And she said, but everything you've said because I'd just done the presentation, they've had all these issues. And I could tell she was like really, it was a bit too much, overwhelming for me. I can't even explain it myself, because I knew what she was saying, and the light bulb had gone on that these children have these issues, but they're not believed. It's not a fault of people. Well, unless you definitely don't want to. But it's not a fault. It's just it hasn't been known, and this is what I'm trying to do with the charity, and this paper with the pain advisors, as you said, Dr. Moore and Bethany Donaghy. So and hopefully more to come.
Yeah, no,
the idea.
I think it's It's been a real eye-opener for me, and I just really want to thank you because, I've said for a long time, I did my PGCE, I looked at SEND as part of my project 15 years ago. I did not really know anything about SEND until I tried to apply for an EHCP for my own child. And even now I'm learning, and I just think this conversation is so important. So thank you so much to coming on tonight and sharing with us, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who's been listening this evening. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I hope that people will keep going. That brings us to the end of today's Late Late Show. Many thanks to today's special guest, Jane Green, MBE, and to everyone who's joined us live. Remember, there are Teachers Talk radio shows all week. Join me again fortnightly for at the same time. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.